The lights came on slowly, one by one, in the massive underground facility beneath what used to be called Colorado. Dr. Sarah Chen felt the warming sensation spread through her body as the hibernation pod released its hold on her cells. Her lungs expanded with the first real breath in 10,000 years. The process took an hour. Sarah's mind gradually cleared from the fog of deep sleep. She remembered everything. The sun had been dying, throwing off massive bursts of radiation that would sterilize Earth's surface for centuries. Humanity had made a choice. They would sleep through the storm and wake when it was safe to return. Around her, other pods were opening. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and leaders were waking up in facilities across the solar system. Sarah checked her neural display. The date made her dizzy. They had slept for 10,247 years. "Status report," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. The facility's artificial intelligence responded immediately. "Welcome back, Dr. Chen. All primary systems functional. Radiation levels normal. Earth's biosphere has recovered to pre-crisis levels. Solar activity stable." Sarah pulled herself from the pod, her muscles weak but functional. The hibernation technology had worked perfectly. She was the first human to wake, by design. As chief science officer, she needed to assess the situation before others joined her. She walked through the facility on shaking legs, each step growing stronger. The AI had maintained everything. The air was fresh, the systems hummed with power. Gardens grown by automated systems provided food. It was miraculous. But something felt wrong. "AI, show me external sensors. What's happening outside?" The screens lit up with data that made Sarah's breath catch. The solar system was full of activity. Not human activity. The sensors detected thousands of ships, hundreds of stations, and dozens of settlements throughout the outer system. Energy signatures she didn't recognize. Communication patterns in languages Earth's computers couldn't translate. "Unknown contacts," the AI reported calmly. "They began appearing approximately 8,000 years ago. They have established permanent presence in the Kuiper Belt, Asteroid Belt, and Jupiter system. Multiple attempts to approach Earth were deterred by automated defense systems, as programmed." Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled up more data. The outer system was crawling with alien civilizations. They had built entire cities on objects humanity had barely begun to explore before the sleep, and they seemed to treat the Sol system like it belonged to them. Over the next week, more humans woke. Admiral Marcus Kim emerged from the Mars facility, bringing military expertise. Governor Yuki Tanaka woke on Luna Base, her administrative skills immediately needed. Chief Engineer David Okonkwo activated from the orbital station, his knowledge of the defense systems critical. They held their first council meeting virtually, each leader appearing as a hologram in the main command center Sarah had established. "This is worse than we thought," Admiral Kim said, his face grim. "I've reviewed the defense logs. These aliens have been testing our boundaries for millennia. They've cataloged our weapons. They've studied our warning beacons. And they've concluded we're no threat." Yuki pulled up a translation the AI had finally managed. "Look at this. It's from something called the Galactic Council. They refer to our automated systems as the Silent Sentinels. They think we're extinct. They've turned our home into an archaeological site." David's hologram showed footage from external cameras. Alien ships moved freely through the outer system. Some were mining asteroids. Others appeared to be tourist vessels, taking visitors on trips to view Earth from orbit. One advertisement the AI had intercepted promised a glimpse of the mysterious extinct human civilization. "They're treating us like a museum," Sarah said quietly. "Like we're already dead." Admiral Kim pulled up tactical data. "The good news is, our defenses worked. Every warning beacon is still active. Every satellite is still functional. The automated systems have kept them away from Earth, Mars, and our major facilities. But they don't seem to understand what those warnings mean." "What do the warnings say?" Yuki asked. Sarah brought up the original messages humanity had programmed before going to sleep. The words were clear and direct. This system is temporarily unoccupied. Its inhabitants will return. Do not colonize. Do not extract resources. Do not interfere. This is not a request. They ignored us, David said. 10,000 years of warnings, and they just ignored us. Admiral Kim leaned forward. Because they don't think we're coming back. As far as they're concerned, we left forever. They've created laws, established territories, and built entire settlements. In their eyes, they own this system now. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. This was humanity's home. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid had been mapped and named by human explorers. Her ancestors had died to protect this system. They had built weapons to defend it, and they had willingly gone to sleep rather than abandon Earth to die alone. Now strangers lived here. Strangers who thought humans were extinct. We have two choices, Admiral Kim said. We can contact them peacefully and negotiate, or we can remind them why we put those warnings in place. We should try diplomacy first, Sarah argued. We don't know their intentions. Maybe they'll leave peacefully. David shook his head. I've analyzed their mining operations. They've extracted billions of tons of resources from our asteroids. They've established permanent habitats on our moons. They're not going to just pack up and leave because we ask nicely. Yuki looked at each of them. What if we show them we're back? Give them a demonstration they can't ignore? Admiral Kim smiled. But it wasn't a friendly expression. I was hoping someone would suggest that. Our ancestors built weapons that could defend against threats they couldn't even imagine. These aliens think our defenses are primitive. Let's show them what primitive human technology can actually do. Sarah wanted to protest, but she couldn't. She had seen the footage of alien tourists taking pictures of Earth like it was an abandoned monument. She had read their research papers discussing the extinct human species with casual academic interest. She had watched them ignore warning after warning. How long do we give them? She asked. 72 hours, Admiral Kim replied. We wake everyone else. We bring all systems online. We send one message in their languages, and we give them 3 days to leave our home. And if they don't? Yuki asked. Admiral Kim's expression hardened. Then, they learn what happens when you wake a species that went to sleep surrounded by weapons. They'll learn that humans didn't put warnings on their door because they were afraid of visitors. We put them there because we knew exactly what we'd do to anyone who didn't listen. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would announce its return. The galaxy had forgotten what humans were capable of. It was time to remember. Coordinator Thresh adjusted the sensors for the 100th time that morning. The Valith scientist had dedicated 40 years to studying the silent sentinels of the Sol system. To most of the galaxy, they were just ancient defense satellites from a dead civilization. To Thresh, they were beautiful mysteries. The research station floated at the edge of the system, a safe distance from the automated defenses. Galactic Council regulations required all research facilities to maintain that distance. The silent sentinels had destroyed 3 ships over the centuries when they ventured too close to the inner planets. Nobody wanted to be the 4th. Coordinator, the supply ship is arriving, his assistant Mira announced. Thresh looked up from his instruments. The young Korathi pilot named Vesa was early this week. She usually brought interesting news from the inner settlements along with their supplies. Vesa's ship docked smoothly. She entered the station with her usual cheerful energy, pushing containers of food and equipment. But today, her expression seemed worried. Something wrong? Thresh asked. Vesa hesitated. Maybe nothing. But I've been hearing strange reports from the inner system. Power fluctuations near Mars. Unusual energy readings from Earth's surface. Some of the mining crews in the asteroid belt say the old human satellites are acting different. Thresh waved a hand dismissively. The systems are 10,000 years old. Of course they're breaking down. It's remarkable they've lasted this long. My grandmother used to say something, Vesa said quietly. She studied extinct species. She always told me, never trust a species' defenses to stay quiet forever. If they built it to last, they meant to come back. Thresh laughed, a bubbling sound natural to Valeth. That's ancient superstition, Vesa. No species can survive 10,000 years of hibernation. The biological requirements alone would be impossible. The humans are gone. They died in whatever catastrophe struck their star. But Vesa didn't look convinced. She unloaded the supplies quickly and left, her ship accelerating away faster than usual. Thresh returned to his research. The humans had been fascinating. The archaeological evidence painted a picture of a violent species that somehow achieved cooperation. They had created weapons capable of destroying their own planet, then made laws to never use them. They had reached their moon before they even unified their governments. They had been chaotic, creative, and contradictory. The Silent Sentinels were perfect examples of human engineering. Simple, robust, and surprisingly effective. Each satellite carried kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, and rudimentary artificial intelligence. Nothing compared to modern galactic technology, but impressive for such a young species. Thresh pulled up reports from other parts of the Sol system. The Mrendari Mining Collective was expanding operations on Mars's moons. The profits were enormous. Human mining techniques had been primitive, leaving vast resources untouched. The Zentari Tourism Company was advertising new packages. Visit the birthplace of humanity. See Earth's preserved cities. Walk where the ancients walked. Tickets were selling well. Many species found humans interesting, despite their extinction. Academic institutions had established observation posts around the system. Universities studied the human question: how such a violent species had managed to reach space without destroying themselves first. The prevailing theory was that they hadn't. Something had destroyed them, probably their own weapons. Thresh's communicator chimed. It was a message from Galactic Council headquarters. They were approving expanded operations in the Sol system. More mining rights, more tourism permits. The system was becoming quite profitable. Coordinator Thresh, you are authorized to establish closer observation posts. The Silent Sentinels have not shown hostile action in over 200 years. The Council believes they are finally degrading. We are reducing the restricted zones. Thresh felt excited. Closer access meant better research. He could finally study the satellites up close, maybe even recover one for detailed analysis. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. He began making plans immediately. The research station would move inward. They would establish new sensor nets. Perhaps they could even land on Earth itself and explore the human cities firsthand. The next day, Thresh held a meeting with other researchers in the system. Holographic projections showed Mrendari miners, Gentari tour operators, and academic observers from a dozen species. The Council has approved expanded access, Thresh announced. This is a historic moment. We'll finally be able to study the humans in detail. A Mrendari supervisor named Cross spoke up. My crews have been wanting to expand to the inner asteroids for years. The mineral content is incredible. With reduced restrictions, we can triple our output. A Gentari representative added, we have customers requesting surface visits to Earth. The preserved cities would make incredible destinations. Imagine walking through an actual human settlement. DuPont's. Not everyone was enthusiastic. An elderly Velcrin military observer named Korthus expressed concern. The Sentinels destroyed 3 ships. They may be old, but they're still dangerous. We should maintain caution. That was centuries ago, Thresh argued. The systems are degrading. The power fluctuations Vesa mentioned are signs of system failure, not increased activity. We have nothing to fear from dead machines. The meeting ended with agreement. Operations would expand. More ships would enter the inner system. The Sol system would finally be fully integrated into galactic civilization. Over the following weeks, activity in the Sol system increased dramatically. Mining ships moved into the asteroid belt in force. Tourist vessels began offering closer flybys of Earth. Research teams prepared expeditions to the surface of Mars. Thresh moved his station closer to Earth, setting up shop near the moon. The view was spectacular. Earth hung below, blue and green and beautiful. The human homeworld had recovered remarkably from whatever catastrophe had struck it. The automated preservation systems had done their job well. He began detailed scans of the nearby sentinels. They were more complex than he had thought. The power systems were still active, drawing energy from sources he couldn't quite identify. The weapons were functional, though hopefully dormant. The AI systems were surprisingly sophisticated for such an old design. One evening, Vesa delivered supplies again. She looked even more worried than before. "The fluctuations are getting worse," she said. "My ship's sensors picked up massive power surges from the inner system. Every sentinel in range is showing increased activity. Coordinator, I think we should pull back." Thresh examined the data she provided. She was right. Power levels were rising across the board. But he interpreted it differently. The systems are failing catastrophically. It's what happens to old technology. They surge before they die, or before they wake up. Vesa said quietly. "There's nothing to wake," Thresh insisted. "The humans are gone. This is just old machinery breaking down." But that night, Thresh couldn't sleep. He ran simulations, analyzed data, and reviewed human history. Something Vesa had said kept bothering him. Her grandmother's warning about species that meant to return. He pulled up the original human warning messages. The ones the Sentinels still broadcast on old radio frequencies. He had read them 1,000 times. But now, he read them again with fresh eyes. "This system is temporarily unoccupied. Its inhabitants will return. Do not colonize. Do not extract resources. Do not interfere. This is not a request. Temporarily unoccupied. Will return. Not might return. Not if we survive. Will return." Thresh felt a chill run through his body. What if the humans hadn't been warning others to stay away because they feared invasion? What if they had been warning others to stay away for their own safety? He was about to contact the council with his concerns when every alarm in his station screamed at once. His screens filled with data that made no sense. Every silent sentinel in the system had activated simultaneously. Power readings were off the scale, weapon systems were online, and something was broadcasting from Earth's surface. A message. In perfect galactic common. A language that wouldn't be invented for another 8,000 years after humans supposedly went extinct. "This is Admiral Marcus Kim of the United Human Coalition. You are currently occupying the Sol system without authorization. You have 72 hours to evacuate all personnel and equipment. Failure to comply will result in defensive action." Thresh stared at the message in absolute horror. The humans weren't extinct. They had never left. They had been sleeping, and now they were awake. The message reached every alien vessel in the Sol system simultaneously. Tourist ships near Earth, mining stations in the asteroid belt, research facilities on the outer planets. Everyone heard Admiral Kim's words, translated perfectly into their own languages. On the human command center, Sarah watched the reactions flood in. Panic. Disbelief. Confusion. Some aliens thought it was a hoax. Others began emergency evacuations immediately. The galaxy had forgotten humans existed, and now they were very suddenly being reminded. 72 hours. Admiral Kim repeated, standing at the tactical display. That gives them 3 days to pack up and leave peacefully. After that, we enforce our boundaries. Sarah still felt uncomfortable with the aggressive approach. "Marcus, we could negotiate. Establish diplomatic relations. They didn't know we were coming back. They ignored our warnings. David said from his station. Every beacon, every message, every automated response told them to stay away. They didn't care. They treated our home like abandoned property. Yuki was monitoring communications from the aliens. The Galactic Council is calling for a meeting. They want to discuss our claims to the system. They're using legal language. Something about 10,000 years of absence constituting abandonment. Admiral Kim's expression hardened. Let them talk about their laws. We didn't agree to those laws. We were here first. We never left. We just went to sleep. And now, we're awake. Over the next 24 hours, the situation escalated quickly. Some aliens began leaving immediately, especially the smaller operations and independent ships. But the major corporations and government facilities didn't budge. They contacted their home governments. They filed legal complaints. They demanded negotiations. The Galactic Council sent an official response. They acknowledged humanity's return, but claimed the Sol system had been legally incorporated into Council jurisdiction 4,000 years ago. They offered to discuss shared governance and reparations for displacement. Sarah read the message with growing anger. They're offering us reparations? For being forced from our own home? They don't see it that way, Yuki explained. In their legal framework, we abandoned the system. They settled it legally. From their perspective, we're the invaders. Admiral Kim sent a one-word response to the Council: no. As the deadline approached, the aliens showed no signs of leaving. The mining operations continued. The research stations stayed in place. The tourist ships kept running their routes. They were calling humanity's bluff. They don't think we'll do anything, David observed. They've studied our weapons. They think the Sentinels are primitive. They don't believe we're a real threat. Then we show them, Admiral Kim said quietly. He opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. All human vessels, prepare for deployment. We're going to give them a demonstration they won't forget. Sarah wanted to protest, but she saw the determination in his eyes. More importantly, she saw the anger in the eyes of every human who had woken to find strangers in their home. They had sacrificed everything to save Earth. They had slept for 10,000 years. And they had come home to find their solar system occupied. Admiral Kim activated the full defense network. Throughout the Sol system, satellites that aliens had dismissed as ancient relics suddenly revealed their true capabilities. Power readings spiked to levels that dwarfed modern weapons. Targeting systems locked onto every alien vessel simultaneously. Railguns that looked simple were actually relativistic weapons capable of accelerating projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. The human frigate Guardian decloaked between Mars and Jupiter. It had been hidden for weeks, observing the aliens while running silent. The ship was 10,000 years old, designed by engineers who knew humans might need to defend their home against unknown threats. Its reactor output alone exceeded the power of the entire Galactic Council research station. Its armor was layered with materials the aliens hadn't even invented yet. Its weapons could track thousands of targets simultaneously. It was a warship designed by a species that had studied warfare for thousands of years and knew exactly how to build something lethal. Captain Amara Osei commanded the Guardian. She was a career military officer who had gone to sleep as a young lieutenant and woken as the commander of humanity's first visible military asset in this new era. She sent a transmission to all alien vessels. This is Captain Osei of the United Human Coalition frigate Guardian. You have 71 hours and 23 minutes to evacuate the Sol system. We are not extinct. We are not primitive. We are home. Leave now, or face the consequences. The aliens panicked. Ships that had been casually mining asteroids suddenly broke off and began calculations for departure. Tourist vessels abandoned their routes and headed for the outer system. Even some of the government facilities started evacuation procedures, but the Galactic Council refused to back down. They sent a military response. Admiral Korthus of the Velkrin fleet arrived with 200 warships representing 15 different species. They were called a peacekeeping force. But everyone knew what they really were. The Council was sending a message of its own. They weren't going to be intimidated by one species, no matter how dramatic their entrance. Korthus opened communications with Admiral Kim. The Velkrin were a proud species with a long military tradition. Korthus had fought in 3 major wars and never lost a battle. Unidentified human vessels, he transmitted. This system has been legally incorporated into Galactic Council jurisdiction for 4,000 years. We acknowledge your return and are willing to negotiate shared governance and reparations. But you must stand down your weapons and enter diplomatic talks. Admiral Kim's response was cold and clear. You have 23 hours. We do not share our home. We do not negotiate for what is already ours. Leave, or be removed. Korthus felt insulted. In his experience, negotiations were always possible. Military force was just a tool to encourage better diplomatic terms. He decided to make a demonstration of his own. 3 of his most advanced warships would take up positions near Mars, showing humanity that the Council meant business. Admiral Kim, we are moving vessels into the Mars orbital zone for peacekeeping purposes. This is not an act of aggression. We are simply establishing our presence during negotiations. You were warned, Admiral Kim replied. Nothing more. The 3 Velkrin warships approached Mars. They were powerful vessels with shields that could withstand nuclear weapons, armor that could shrug off most energy weapons, and sensors that could track objects across solar systems. Their crews were experienced warriors. The human response was instantaneous. The sentinels surrounding Mars didn't fire energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they accelerated small tungsten projectiles to relativistic speeds. The projectiles moved so fast that the Velkrin sensors couldn't even detect them until they hit. The impacts released energy equivalent to massive nuclear weapons. The Velkrin shields never activated because there was nothing to shield against until the projectile had already passed through the hull. All 3 ships exploded simultaneously, brilliant flashes visible from Earth. The entire alien fleet watched in horror. Modern military doctrine revolved around shields and energy weapons. The humans were using kinetic weapons, accelerated to speeds that made shields useless. It was old technology, supposedly primitive, but it was devastatingly effective. On Vessa's ship, Coordinator Thresh finally understood. He had been evacuating with the other researchers, and now he watched the destruction on his screens. They weren't keeping others out because they were afraid, he whispered. They were keeping others out because they knew exactly how dangerous they could be. The warnings weren't for human protection. They were for everyone else's. Vessa nodded slowly. My grandmother was right. Never wake a species that builds defenses to last 10,000 years. They're not planning to run away. They're planning to fight. Admiral Korthus stared at his tactical display, unable to process what had just happened. He had lost 3 ships in less than a second. His fleet was the most powerful military force in several sectors, and the humans had destroyed 3 of his best vessels without any apparent effort. All ships, retreat to the Kuiper Belt boundary, he ordered. His voice shook slightly. Do not approach the inner system. Do not fire weapons. We are falling back to defensive positions. The Council fleet withdrew in disorder. The peacekeeping force, meant to intimidate humanity, was fleeing from weapons that were 10,000 years old. Admiral Kim broadcast one final message. You have 22 hours and 57 minutes. The countdown continues. End quote. Throughout the galaxy, species watched the footage of the destroyed warships. News networks analyzed the human weapons. Military experts tried to explain how such old technology could be so effective, and slowly, a new understanding spread. Humanity wasn't primitive. They were experienced. They had studied war for thousands of years. They had built weapons designed to last millennia, and they had gone to sleep knowing exactly what they would do to anyone who didn't respect their warnings. The galaxy was learning a difficult lesson. Never assume a sleeping species is a dead species. And never ignore warnings from a species that understands warfare well enough to try avoiding it. The Galactic Council headquarters exploded with activity. Representatives from hundreds of species watched the footage from the Sol system over and over. 3 advanced warships destroyed in seconds. The humans hadn't even bothered with warning shots. They had simply eliminated the threat with frightening efficiency. Council leader Vorn, a senior Mrendari diplomat, called an emergency session. The chamber filled with holographic projections of representatives from across the galaxy. Everyone was talking at once. The peaceful return of an extinct species had turned into a potential war. "They murdered our peacekeepers," shouted the Velkrin representative, still shaking from the shock of losing ships. "They warned us," countered a Korathi delegate. "Multiple times. We chose to ignore those warnings. Their warnings were 10,000 years old," Vorn argued. "How were we supposed to know they were still valid? They abandoned the system, did they?" The question came from an elderly historian named Preth. "I've reviewed the original messages. They said, 'temporarily unoccupied,' and 'inhabitants will return.' Those aren't the words of a species abandoning their home. Those are the words of a species planning to come back." Vorn pulled up legal documents. Council law is clear. 10,000 years of absence constitutes abandonment. We have established settlements, trade routes, and resource extraction operations. We have legal rights to that system. "Legal rights they don't recognize," Preth replied. "They were never part of the council. They never agreed to our laws. We created those laws while they slept and assumed they would accept them when they woke." Admiral Korthus appeared as a hologram, broadcasting from his retreating fleet. "We need to discuss the military situation. The human weapons are unlike anything in our current arsenal. They're using relativistic kinetics. Our shields are designed for energy weapons and missiles. They're completely ineffective against projectiles moving at that speed." A military analyst brought up tactical displays. "The humans have hundreds of these weapons platforms throughout their system, each one capable of engaging multiple targets. Our estimates suggest they could destroy a fleet of several thousand ships before we could mount an effective response." The chamber fell silent. Several thousand ships. The Council had faced aggressive species before, but none with this kind of defensive capability. And these were supposedly old weapons. What could modern human technology do? "We need to negotiate," Vorn said finally. "Send a diplomatic team. Offer concessions. We cannot afford a war with a species this militarily capable." "They don't want concessions," Korthus said bitterly. "I tried negotiating. They want complete evacuation. No sharing. No compromise. Just everyone out of their system. Then we evacuate," said Preth simply. "We made a mistake. We ignored clear warnings and settled a system that wasn't ours. Now we face the consequences. We have 4,000 years of settlement." Vorn protested. "Millions of citizens living in that system. Trillions in economic value. We can't just abandon it." "We don't have a choice," Preth replied. "Unless you want to send more ships to die." While the council debated, evacuations accelerated throughout the Sol system. The Mrendari mining operations were packing up hastily, leaving behind equipment they couldn't move quickly enough. The Gentari tourism companies canceled all flights and began refund processes. Research stations transmitted final data before beginning shutdown procedures. Vesa helped coordinate evacuations, her small ship running constantly between stations and larger transports. She encountered Coordinator Thresh on one run, helping him move the last of his research data. 40 years of work, Thresh said sadly, watching the Sol system recede behind them. "All gone. You're still alive," Vesa pointed out. "Unlike those 3 warship crews. My grandmother used to say that you can always gather new data, but you can't come back from death." Thresh nodded. "Your grandmother was wise. I should have listened to you about the power fluctuations. The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. None of us did, Vesa said. We wanted to believe the humans were gone because it made things easier. We could study their things, use their resources, explore their worlds. We didn't want to consider that they might come back angry. Are they angry? Thresh asked. Or just protective? Vesa thought about that. Both, I think. Imagine going to sleep in your home and waking up to find strangers have moved in, used all your things, and declared that they own everything now because you were gone too long. As ships fled the Sol system, the human countdown continued. 20 hours, 15 hours, 10 hours. The evacuations were going well, but not everyone could leave in time. Some facilities were too large to pack up quickly. Some species moved slower than others, and some simply refused to believe the humans would actually follow through on their threat. A Rendari mining platform in the asteroid belt sent a message to the Council. Their evacuation would take another week. They requested an extension of the deadline. They had families on board, civilians who had done nothing wrong. The Council forwarded the request to Admiral Kim. His response was brief. You have 8 hours. Evacuate now, or suffer the consequences. There will be no extensions. Sarah confronted him in the command center. Marcus, they have children on that platform. We can't just kill civilians. They have 8 hours, he repeated. That's more than enough time to get people off that platform and onto evacuation ships. If they're still there when the deadline expires, it's because they chose to stay. 1. But, no buts, Sarah. We gave them 3 days. We gave them clear warnings. We showed them what happens when they ignore us. If we extend the deadline, it sends a message that we're not serious, that we can be manipulated. Every other species will start asking for extensions. Before you know it, we'll be negotiating for years while they continue living in our home. David supported him. Sarah, I understand your concern, but the Admiral is right. We need to show strength now, or we'll be fighting this battle forever. 1 deadline, 1 response. Clear and decisive, Yuki added quietly. The platform is owned by a corporation. They could afford to send evacuation ships immediately. They're gambling that we won't actually fire on civilians. They're using those families as human shields. Sarah felt sick. The politics of this new galaxy were complicated and ruthless. But she also understood the logic. Humanity needed to establish boundaries immediately, or they would spend decades fighting for respect. The Rendari Corporation, realizing the humans weren't bluffing, finally sent emergency evacuation ships. They moved their personnel in a frantic rush, leaving behind all equipment and resources. The platform was emptied with 40 minutes to spare. As the deadline approached, Admiral Kim sent one final broadcast. This is Admiral Marcus Kim. You have 10 minutes to leave the Sol system. Any vessels, stations, or personnel remaining after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Sarah watched the countdown on the main display. 10 minutes. 9 minutes. 8 minutes. Ships were still fleeing. Their engines pushed to maximum as they raced for the boundary. Some wouldn't make it. A few research stations had been abandoned with staff still aboard. The evacuation ships arriving too late. 5 minutes. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. Admiral, Yuki reported. We have 17 vessels and 3 stations still inside the boundary. 2 of the vessels are having engine trouble. 1 station has 23 staff members who missed their evacuation ship. Admiral Kim's hand hovered over the weapons release. Sarah could see the struggle in his eyes. He didn't want to kill anyone, but he had made a promise, and the entire galaxy was watching. Hail those vessels and stations, he ordered. Tell them they have 3 minutes to surrender and request asylum. If they do, we'll bring them in as prisoners. If they don't, we fire. The message went out. 2 minutes remaining. The damaged vessels immediately surrendered, grateful for the option. 1 station surrendered. But 2 stations and 1 ship refused, either not receiving the message or choosing to ignore it. 1 minute. Orders, sir? The weapons officer asked. Admiral Kim took a breath. Fire. The silent sentinels throughout the system activated simultaneously. Relativistic projectiles streaked across space. The 2 stations and 1 ship disappeared in flashes of light. Quick, clean, final. The galaxy watched the execution in stunned silence. The humans had done exactly what they promised. No mercy, no exceptions. The deadline had passed, and they had enforced it. On the council station, Vorn stared at his display in shock. They actually did it. They killed those people. Preeth looked at him with sad eyes. No. We killed them. We ignored their warnings. We pushed them to this. We treated their home as abandoned property. These deaths are on our hands, Vorn, not theirs. Admiral Korthus, watching from his fleet, felt a cold understanding settle over him. He had faced many enemies in his career. Some were brutal. Some were tactical. Some were relentless. But he had never faced an enemy quite like humanity. They didn't want war. They had tried to avoid it with warnings and countdowns. But when pushed, they didn't hesitate. They didn't negotiate. They simply acted, with overwhelming force. They're not conquerors, he said quietly to his staff. They're guardians. They'll do anything to protect their home. Anything. The Sol system fell silent. Empty of alien presence. For the first time in 8,000 years. The Guardian frigate patrolled the boundary, making sure everyone understood. This was human space. The warnings were real. And humanity was awake. 3 weeks after the deadline, Dr. Sarah Chen traveled to the neutral station, established at the edge of the Sol system. The Galactic Council had requested formal negotiations. Admiral Kim had agreed, but only on humanity's terms. The meeting would happen in neutral space. No weapons. No military presence except the Guardian frigate maintaining a respectful distance. Sarah felt nervous as her shuttle approached the station. She had been chosen as humanity's diplomatic representative because of her scientific background and her more moderate views. But she carried the full authority of the human government, and everyone knew the stakes. The station was new, built hastily by the Council specifically for these talks. Inside, representatives from dozens of species waited. Sarah recognized Coordinator Thresh, now serving as a historical consultant. Vesa was there too, acting as a neutral observer. Admiral Korthus represented the military perspective, and Council Leader Vorn would lead the negotiations. Sarah entered the chamber, and every eye turned to her. She could feel the mixture of fear, curiosity, and resentment. Some species viewed humans as victims who had rightfully reclaimed their home. Others saw them as aggressive newcomers who had murdered civilians. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Vorn opened the proceedings. Dr. Chen, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. The Council wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity and discuss the future of the Sol system. Sarah sat at the designated position, alone facing the assembled representatives. She took a breath and began. Before we discuss the future, we need to establish understanding about the past. The Sol system has always been humanity's home. 10,000 years ago, our sun became unstable. We faced a choice: abandon Earth forever, or go to sleep and trust that we could survive until conditions improved. She brought up holographic displays showing human history, the desperate preparations, the construction of hibernation facilities, the careful programming of defensive systems. We left warnings, clear warnings. We told anyone who found our system that we would return. We asked them not to settle, not to take resources, not to interfere. Thresh spoke up. Dr. Chen, I have studied those warnings extensively, but they were 10,000 years old, broadcast in languages no one spoke, using technology no one recognized. How were we supposed to know they were still valid? Sarah's eyes hardened. Because they were warnings. When you find a sign that says danger, you don't assume it's safe just because the sign is old. You exercise caution. You investigate. You respect the possibility that the danger is real. She changed the display to show alien activity in the Sol system over the millennia. Mining operations, tourist ships, research stations. You didn't just ignore our warnings. You cataloged them. You studied them. You knew exactly what they said. And you decided we were dead. So the warnings didn't matter anymore. Vorn tried to interject, but Sarah continued. Let me be clear. We understand that you didn't know we were alive. We understand that 10,000 years is a long time. We even understand that you created laws and frameworks during our absence. But none of that changes the fundamental truth. This was our home. We never abandoned it. We just went to sleep. A Velcrin military observer spoke up. You killed council personnel, 3 warships and multiple station crews. How do you justify that violence? Sarah's expression remained steady. We gave you 3 days. We sent messages in your own languages. We showed you our capabilities. We offered every possible warning short of actually firing at you. And when you sent warships to establish peacekeeping positions in our territory, we responded. Those deaths are tragic. But they were not unprovoked. Admiral Corthus nodded slowly. She's right. I ordered those ships forward. I thought the humans were bluffing. I was wrong. Those deaths are my responsibility, not theirs. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued that human actions were justified. Others claimed they were excessive. Sarah waited for the noise to die down. Finally, Vorn raised his hand for silence. Dr. Chen, the Council acknowledges that we may have made mistakes in our approach to the Sol system, but we must discuss the legal situation. Council law states that 10,000 years of absence constitutes abandonment. We have settlements, trade agreements, and established presence. You cannot simply erase 4,000 years of legal framework. Sarah leaned forward. You're right. We can't erase your laws. But we also don't have to follow them. We were never part of your council. We never agreed to your legal frameworks. You created laws that applied to our home without our consent. That's not legitimacy. That's colonialism. The word hung in the air. Colonialism. For many species, it carried historical weight. They had been victims of it themselves, in their distant past. Vesa spoke up unexpectedly. If I may, council leader. My grandmother studied extinct species. She always said the most dangerous species weren't the ones that fought constantly. It was the ones that fought only when necessary, because they understood exactly how much damage they could do. She looked at Sarah. Humans created weapons capable of destroying their own planet. Then, they made treaties to never use them. They understood mutually assured destruction before they even left their solar system. They're not aggressive by nature. They're terrified of what they can do. So they overcompensate with overwhelming defensive responses to end conflicts immediately. Sarah nodded. That's accurate. We know what war costs. We've studied it extensively. We've lived through world wars, genocides, and near-extinction events. We understand violence in ways that most species never will. That's why we try so hard to avoid it. And that's why we're so dangerous when we're forced into it. Thresh added his perspective. I've spent 40 years studying human culture. Everything Vesa said is true. But there's more. Humans are builders. They're explorers. They're cooperators. Their entire history is about competing groups eventually finding ways to work together. They want peace. But they'll fight to the death to protect what they love. The conversation shifted. Representatives began asking about human technology, culture, and intentions. Sarah answered honestly. Yes. Humanity had advanced weapons. Yes. They would defend their territory absolutely. But they also wanted trade, knowledge, exchange, and eventually friendship with other species. We're not conquerors, Sarah said firmly. We don't want your systems. We don't want your resources. We just want our home. And we want respect. Treat us as equals, honor our boundaries, and we'll be your allies. Violate our space, threaten our people, and you'll face the same response as those 3 warships. Vorn looked at his fellow representatives. He could see the calculation in their eyes. Humanity was powerful, but they were just one species. The Council represented thousands. A war would be devastating for both sides. But more importantly, humanity wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. They wanted their home system. They wanted recognition. They wanted to be left alone, unless invited otherwise. These were terms the Council could accept. Dr. Chen, Vorn said carefully. The Council proposes the following. We formally recognize the Sol system as human sovereign territory. We withdraw all claims and settlements. In exchange, humanity agrees to establish diplomatic relations, open trade negotiations, and share defensive technology with Council military forces. Sarah shook her head. We'll withdraw the weapons sharing. We'll open diplomatic relations and trade. But we won't share our military technology. Not yet. Maybe in a few decades, after trust is established. But not now. You don't trust us, Vorn said quietly. Would you? Sarah replied. You spent millennia occupying our home. You ignored our warnings. You only left when we forced you out. Trust is earned. Council leader, you'll need to prove you respect us before we share our most sensitive technology. The negotiations continued for hours. Eventually, they reached agreement. The Sol system would be recognized as human territory. All alien settlements would be removed within 90 days. In exchange, humanity would establish embassies on major council worlds, open trade routes, and share scientific knowledge in non-military fields. As the meeting concluded, Thresh approached Sarah privately. What will you do now? The galaxy knows you exist. Some will fear you. Some will want your technology. Some will challenge you. Sarah smiled tiredly. We'll do what we've always done. We'll try to be peaceful. We'll extend hands of friendship to those who respect us. We'll trade, share knowledge, and cooperate with those who prove trustworthy. She paused. But we'll also keep our weapons ready, our defenses strong, and our warnings clear. You asked what we'll do when we hear threats? We'll respond with overwhelming force. We'll protect our home absolutely. And we'll never, ever let anyone forget that we're here to stay. Vesa joined them. The galaxy is updating its databases. Humanity is no longer listed as extinct or primitive. The new designation is Protected Status. Extreme Caution. Do not provoke. Is that acceptable? Sarah laughed. It's honest. I'll take it. As Sarah's shuttle returned to Earth, she looked at the planet below. Blue and green and beautiful. Home. They had fought for it. They had slept for it. And now, they had reclaimed it. On Earth's surface, humans were stepping outside for the first time in 10,000 years. They breathed fresh air. They felt sunlight. They walked on ground their ancestors had fought to preserve. And above them, the last alien vessels were departing, leaving the Sol system empty of foreign presence. Admiral Kim stood beside Governor Tanaka, watching the evacuations complete. Do you think they'll respect the boundaries? Yuki considered. Most will. Some won't. And we'll deal with those when the time comes. But we've made our position clear. This is our home. These are our rules. And we're willing to enforce them. Across the galaxy, species were learning humanity's story. A species that survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near extinction. A species that went to sleep surrounded by weapons and woke up ready to use them. A species that desperately wanted peace, but was frighteningly good at war. Vesa filed her official report to the Korathi government. She wrote, "I have witnessed the return of humanity to the galactic stage. They are not conquerors. They are not pacifists. They are guardians who slept for 10,000 years and woke to find strangers in their home. The galaxy would do well to remember this lesson. The most dangerous species aren't the ones who threaten loudly. They're the ones who warn once, then act decisively. Humanity has warned us. Let us be wise enough to listen." The report concluded with her grandmother's old saying, now proven prophetically true. Never trust a species' defenses to stay quiet forever. If they built it to last, they meant to come back. And when they do, pray you weren't the one who ignored their warnings. Humanity was awake. The galaxy had forgotten what sleeping guardians could do. Now, it would never forget again. The massive fleet hung in the darkness of space like a monument to terror itself. 300 warships from the Galactic Hegemony Council stretched across the border of human territory, each vessel larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ships were not just machines of war, they were designed to break the spirit of any species that saw them. Grand Admiral Zixthara stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 eyes scanned the view screens with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to the standard protocol that had worked for 50,000 years. The protocol was simple. Show overwhelming force, demonstrate past victories, and watch the new species crumble before a single shot was fired. The hulls of the hegemony ships were decorated with the bones and skulls of defeated species. Massive banners, made from the flags of conquered worlds, hung between the weapons arrays, each ship broadcast on specific frequencies, transmitting the recorded final screams and pleas for mercy from hundreds of civilizations that no longer existed. It was psychological warfare perfected over millennia. "The human diplomatic vessel is approaching," reported his second officer, a thin Vexalian, whose skin changed colors with emotion. Currently, it showed the confident purple of anticipated victory. Zixthara allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They had spread across a mere 30 systems, building modest colonies and trade routes. Their technology was adequate, but unremarkable. Their military consisted of patrol ships and defensive platforms, nothing that could challenge even a single hegemony dreadnought. The human diplomatic ship was tiny compared to the surrounding armada. It looked like a small fish swimming toward a school of predators. The vessel was clean and functional, with none of the elaborate decorations or intimidation displays that most species adopted once they reached space. It simply existed, plain and almost boring in its efficiency. "Open a channel," Zixthara commanded. "Let us begin the ritual of submission." The view screen shifted to show the interior of the human ship. A man in a simple military uniform appeared. He had dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything without reaction. His name, according to the intelligence reports, was Captain Park Minjun, a mid-level diplomat and military officer. "Captain Park," Zixthara began, his voice resonating with the deep authority that made most species tremble. "You stand before the assembled might of the Galactic Hegemony Council. We represent 4,000 species and control 70,000 worlds. You will observe what awaits those who refuse to join us." With a gesture, Zixthara activated the holographic display system. Images filled the space between the ships, massive 3-dimensional recordings that showed world after world falling to hegemony forces. Cities burning, populations fleeing, leaders kneeling in surrender. The recordings were carefully selected for maximum psychological impact. They showed species begging for their children to be spared. They showed proud warrior races, throwing down their weapons in despair. They showed the moment when hope died in the eyes of those who realized they could not win. Zixthara watched Captain Park's face carefully. This was the moment when most species broke. Their representatives would begin to shake, to sweat, to show the physical signs of overwhelming fear. Some would cry. Some would try to maintain dignity, while their bodies betrayed their terror. All would understand that resistance was futile, but Captain Park's expression was strange. His lips pressed together tightly, as if he was trying to hold something in. His shoulders seemed to shake slightly. Was this a human fear response? The intelligence reports had been unclear about human physical reactions to stress. "You see before you the fate of defiance," Zixthara continued, warming to his speech. He had delivered variations of this message hundreds of times. The hegemony offers a choice. Submit peacefully. Accept our guidance and protection, and your species will be allowed to continue. Refuse, and you will join the ash of history. Your worlds will be examples for the next species that considers resistance. Captain Park raised one hand to his mouth, coughing slightly. His face was turning red. Yes, this must be fear. The human was trying to maintain composure, while his body betrayed his terror. "We have destroyed species with technology far beyond yours," Zixthara pressed on. "We have broken empires that ruled for 10,000 years before your species learned to make fire. We have turned the homeworlds of defiant races into lifeless rocks that serve as navigation warnings for others. What makes you think humanity could succeed where so many others have failed?" The recordings shifted to show the skull decorations on the hegemony ships in detail. Each skull was from a species that had refused to submit. They were preserved and displayed as permanent reminders of the cost of defiance. The camera zoomed in on specific examples, showing the diversity of life that had been extinguished. Captain Park's shoulders were definitely shaking now. He seemed to be having trouble breathing. His face was very red, and his eyes were watering. "I must," Park said, his voice strained. "I must request a recess to consult with Earth. This is a significant decision that requires input from my government." Perfect, Zixthara thought. The human could barely speak from fear. He was buying time, hoping desperately that somehow his leaders would find a way out of this impossible situation. They never did. "You have 12 of your Earth hours," Zixthara declared magnanimously. "We will await your response here. Observe our fleet well, Captain Park. Count our ships. Study our weapons. Understand that what you see is merely a fraction of our power. Then return with your answer." The communication ended. Captain Park's image disappeared from the view screen. Zixthara turned to his officers, satisfaction evident in his posture. "Another species learns its place in the galaxy. Begin the next phase. I want all ships to activate their full intimidation arrays. Let the humans see what awaits them in every direction they look. When their captain returns, he will bring unconditional surrender." The bridge crew moved efficiently to carry out his orders. Across the Armada, more weapon systems powered up for display. More recordings of defeated enemies began broadcasting. More ships moved into formation to create an inescapable wall of military might. What Zixthara did not know was that aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Captain Park Min-jun had finally allowed himself to do what he had been desperately holding back during the entire communication. He burst into laughter so hard that tears ran down his face. Captain Park Min-jun tried to compose himself, but every time he looked at the recordings his crew had made of the hegemony fleet, he started laughing again. Around him, the rest of the diplomatic vessel's crew were having similar problems. "Sir," said Lieutenant Chen, wiping tears from her eyes, "we need to send our report to Earth Command, but I cannot stop watching this. Did you see the skeleton decorations? They look like they bought them from a discount Halloween store." Park nodded, taking deep breaths to calm himself. I know. But we have to be professional about this. They are clearly serious. Even if they look ridiculous to us." He opened a secure channel to Earth. Within minutes, the faces of several high-ranking military officials and government leaders appeared on his screen. Park delivered his report as professionally as he could manage, describing the hegemony fleet, their demands, and their intimidation display. There was a long silence after he finished. Then, from Earth, someone started giggling. Within seconds, the entire command center on Earth had erupted into laughter. "I am sorry, Captain Park," said Admiral Kim, trying to control herself. "But did they really think the skulls would scare us? Do they not understand human culture at all?" "Apparently not, Admiral," Park replied. "They seemed very proud of their display. I think it genuinely works on other species." "Of course it does," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the xenopsychology expert who had joined the call. "Most species that reach space travel did so through cooperation and collective effort. They tend to be naturally more cautious, more community-focused. The idea of death, especially violent death, carries significant psychological weight for them." She pulled up some data on her screen. "Humans are unusual. We are one of the few apex predator species to achieve spaceflight. We evolved hunting and being hunted. Death is familiar to us. We have spent our entire cultural history making art about it, telling stories about it, and yes, even making entertainment about it. So their intimidation display hits our cultural blind spot," Park said. "Worse than that," Martinez continued. "It hits what we find amusing. The trying to be scary aesthetic is something we have developed entire entertainment industries around. Horror movies, Halloween, haunted houses, scary stories around campfires. We actively seek out controlled fear experiences for fun. Reason. On Earth, more human ships were being prepared to join Park's vessel. The response fleet was not a military armada. It was a standard diplomatic and observation force, designed to study the hegemony and establish communication protocols. Nobody on Earth actually believed the hegemony would attack. If they wanted to destroy humanity, they would have done so already, not wasted time with elaborate theatrical displays. The human ships began arriving at the border over the next few hours. Each one that arrived had crew members who immediately started taking pictures of the hegemony fleet. The images spread across human communication networks rapidly. On the Eternal Dominion, Grand Admiral Zixthara was becoming increasingly confused and disturbed. His intelligence officers had intercepted human communications, and what they found made no sense. "Admiral," his communication specialist reported, her voice uncertain, "the humans are broadcasting on open channels. They are not encrypted military communications. They appear to be social exchanges. Show me." Zixthara commanded, the main screen filled with intercepted human transmissions. Zixthara watched in growing bewilderment as human crew members shared images of his fleet with captions like, "Best haunted house setup ever. And these guys take Halloween really seriously." There were comparisons to something called theme park decorations, and references to trying too hard to be edgy. One particularly popular image showed a close-up of the skull decorations on a hegemony dreadnought with a human text overlay reading, "When you order your intimidating space fleet from the discount store, what is Halloween?" Zixthara demanded. His xenocultural advisor, a Peltharian scholar who had studied dozens of species, pulled up information on human culture. What he found only deepened the confusion. "Admiral, Halloween is a human cultural celebration where they voluntarily dress up as frightening creatures and decorate their environments with death imagery for entertainment purposes. It appears to be primarily aimed at their children as a fun activity." Zixthara felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service: complete bewilderment. They make their children celebrate death symbols? As entertainment? "It appears so, Admiral. They also have something called haunted houses, where they pay currency to have other humans jump out and try to frighten them in controlled environments. They consider this enjoyable recreation." Another officer spoke up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission request from Captain Park. He says he is ready to deliver humanity's response." Zixthara straightened himself, pushing away the confusion. Perhaps the humans were using humor as a coping mechanism for their fear. He had seen that before in some species. They would laugh or make jokes to hide their terror. "Yes, That must be it. Open the channel, he commanded. Captain Park appeared again. And this time, his composure was better. He looked professional and diplomatic, though there was still a strange lightness in his expression. Grand Admiral Zixthara, Park began formally. I have consulted with Earth, and we have prepared our response to your ultimatum. However, before I deliver it, I have been asked to seek clarification on a cultural matter. Speak, Zixthara said. Your fleet displays are very elaborate and clearly required significant effort and planning. We want to make sure we understand their intent correctly. Are they meant to be frightening? The question was so unexpected that Zixthara did not know how to respond for a moment. Of course they are meant to be frightening. They display the fate of all who oppose the hegemony. Park nodded slowly. I see. Grand Admiral, I need to inform you of a cultural difference that may be causing some confusion. Humans have a different psychological response to death imagery and intimidation displays than you may be expecting. He gestured, and images appeared on the shared screen. They showed human children dressed in skeleton costumes, smiling and carrying bags of candy. They showed elaborate decorations of fake graveyards in front of human homes. They showed people laughing as they walked through dark buildings where actors jumped out to scare them. This is Halloween, Park explained gently. One of our major cultural celebrations. We decorate with skulls and death imagery as entertainment. We actively seek out experiences designed to frighten us because we find them enjoyable when we know they are not real threats. More images appeared. These showed human horror movies, with titles like Alien Invasion and Space Monsters. They showed book covers for scary stories. They showed theme park attractions with elaborate monster displays. We have entire industries dedicated to creating scary imagery for entertainment purposes, Park continued. Our psychological response to things that look scary but are not actually dangerous is not fear. It is pattern recognition that tells us the threat is not real, which often results in amusement. Zixthara stared at the images, his mind struggling to process this information. You are saying that our fleet displays, perfected over 50,000 years, appear to you as entertainment? Park's expression became sympathetic. I am saying that they hit a very specific cultural blind spot for humans. We recognize them as trying to be frightening, but that recognition itself tells us they are not actually dangerous. Dangerous things do not waste time trying to look scary. They simply act. Around the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, officers exchanged confused looks. Their ultimate weapon, the intimidation protocol that had brought countless species to submission without firing a shot, was useless against these strange predator descendants, who had turned fear itself into entertainment. Grand Admiral Zixthara felt something dangerous rising inside him. It was not fear or confusion anymore. It was anger, mixed with humiliation. His perfect protocol, the method that had brought thousands of species to their knees, was being treated as a joke by these primitive humans. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the bridge. If they do not fear our symbols, they will fear our power. Activate all weapon systems. We will demonstrate what real force looks like. Across the hegemony fleet, massive weapons came online. Planetary siege cannons that could crack the crust of a world emerged from hidden bays. Antimatter torpedo tubes opened, revealing warheads that could destroy entire fleets. Quantum destabilizers charged up. Weapons so powerful they could tear apart the fabric of space itself. Target the uninhabited moon in this system, Zixthara commanded. Let the humans see what awaits their worlds if they continue to mock us. The hegemony fleet fired as one. The moon that had orbited peacefully for billions of years simply ceased to exist. The siege cannons shattered it into dust. The antimatter warheads consumed the fragments. The quantum destabilizers erased what remained, leaving nothing but empty space where a celestial body had been. Again, Zixthara ordered. Target the asteroids in the belt. More demonstrations of power followed. Each one was carefully calculated to show a different aspect of hegemony military technology. The weapons could destroy, disintegrate, or completely erase targets from existence. It was a display of such overwhelming force that most species would immediately begin surrender negotiations. On the human ships, the reaction was not what Zixthara expected. Did you see the containment field configuration on that antimatter warhead? One human engineer was broadcasting on an open channel. The magnetic bottle design is actually more efficient than our current models. Focus on the quantum destabilizer, another voice replied excitedly. They are using a cascade effect to multiply the dimensional tier. I need to get this data to the physics department at New Cambridge. Recording everything? A third human confirmed. This is better than any weapons demonstration our own military has ever done. We are getting complete operational data on every system they are using. Zixthara listened to these transmissions with growing disbelief. The humans were not terrified. They were excited. They were studying the weapons like students at an academy, analyzing the technology with professional interest rather than existential dread. Explain this, he demanded of his xenocultural advisor. The Peltharian scholar was reviewing human cultural data frantically. Admiral, it appears that humans have a strong cultural tendency toward what they call reverse engineering and problem solving. Their entire technological advancement has been based on seeing something complex and figuring out how it works. That is how all species develop technology, Zixthara said impatiently. Yes, but humans take it further. They view impressive technology not as proof of their inferiority, but as a challenge to understand and eventually overcome. Their entire space program was reverse engineered from theoretical physics. They built their first faster-than-light drive by studying natural phenomena and working backward to understand the principles. Another officer added a troubling detail. Admiral, we are receiving formal requests from 3 human research stations. They are asking if they can examine any unexploded hegemony ordnance for academic purposes. They want to study our weapons? Zixthara could not believe what he was hearing. It appears so. One message says, and I quote, "The antimatter containment system you demonstrated would solve several problems our engineering corps has been working on. Would it be possible to examine an intact example?" Captain Park's face appeared on the communication screen again, unbidden. He looked slightly embarrassed. Grand Admiral, I apologize for the enthusiasm of our scientific community. Your weapons demonstration was indeed impressive from a technical standpoint. However, I have been asked to clarify something about human psychology that may help explain our reaction. Zixthara said nothing, simply staring at the human who had somehow turned his ultimate show of force into an academic presentation. Humans are what xenobiologists classify as persistence predators, Park explained. We evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us. Our planet has extreme weather, aggressive fauna, diseases that adapt faster than most species can handle, and natural disasters that regularly reshape entire continents. Images appeared showing Earth, massive storms that could flatten cities, volcanoes that blocked out the sun, earthquakes that tore the ground apart, floods that consumed entire regions. It was a violent, dangerous world. To survive on Earth, humans developed a specific psychological trait, Park continued. We view obstacles and dangers not as reasons to give up, but as problems to solve. When we see something powerful or dangerous, our instinct is not to run away. Our instinct is to understand it, figure out how it works, and find a way to overcome it. More images showed human history. Humans climbing the tallest mountains just to prove they could. Humans diving to the deepest ocean trenches to see what was there. Humans launching themselves into space before they had proven it was safe, just to find out what would happen. We also developed very specific threat recognition, Park said. Things that look scary, but are performative, do not register as real threats. Real threats on Earth do not waste time trying to intimidate. A predator does not roar before it attacks. A storm does not announce itself with dramatic displays. Real danger simply acts. Zixthara felt something cold settling in his chest. You are saying that our demonstrations prove we are not a real threat? I am saying that your demonstrations prove you are trying to avoid actual conflict, Park replied carefully. Species that truly intend to destroy others do not spend time showing off their weapons. They simply use them. Your elaborate displays tell us that you would prefer submission without battle, which means you view battle as costly, even for you. The Peltharian advisor was nodding slowly. He is correct, Admiral. Our entire protocol is designed to avoid actual combat, because combat is expensive and risky, even for us. We have never encountered a species that could read that intent from our actions. Furthermore, Park continued, humans have been the apex predator on our world for hundreds of thousands of years. We are familiar with being the most dangerous thing in our environment. Impressive displays of power do not trigger fear in us. They trigger analysis and planning. We see your weapons and immediately begin calculating how to counter them, not how to surrender to them. Another human transmission was intercepted. This one, from a military strategic planning session. Human officers were calmly discussing tactics for fighting the hegemony fleet if it came to battle. They were not discussing how to survive or escape. They were discussing how to win. The siege cannons have a charge time of approximately 40 seconds based on the power readings, one human analyst was saying. That is enough time to close distance and target the weapons arrays directly. The antimatter torpedoes are powerful but slow. Point defense systems should be able to intercept most of them if we maintain proper spacing. The quantum destabilizers are the real threat, another voice added. But they seem to require multiple ships to fire simultaneously to create the cascade effect. If we can disrupt their formation, we reduce their effectiveness significantly. Zixthara realized with growing horror that the humans were not impressed by hegemony power. They were studying it for weaknesses. While his fleet was trying to inspire fear, the humans were preparing for war with the calm professionalism of experienced soldiers. Captain Park, Zixthara said slowly, are you telling me that nothing we have shown you has caused fear? Park considered the question carefully. Your technology is impressive, Grand Admiral. Your weapons are powerful. Your fleet is large. But no, they have not caused fear. If you wanted to destroy us, you would have attacked already. Instead, you are talking, which means you believe we have value alive. That gives us negotiating position, not reasons to be afraid. The communication ended, and Zixthara stood in silence on his bridge, trying to understand how 50,000 years of perfected intimidation had completely failed against a species that had barely left its own star system. The tension between the hegemony fleet and the human ships had reached a strange stalemate. Grand Admiral Zixthara was preparing to make a decision he had never needed to make before, whether to actually attack a species that refused to be intimidated. It would be costly, messy, and would undermine the entire foundation of hegemony expansion strategy. If word spread that intimidation had failed, other species might find courage to resist. Before he could give any orders, every sensor on every ship in both fleets suddenly screamed warnings simultaneously. Admiral, his sensor officer shouted, all four of his arms working frantically across his console. Dark space rupture detected. Multiple signatures emerging at the system's edge. The main view screen shifted to show the source of the disturbance. Space itself was tearing open. Massive wounds in reality through which something ancient and terrible was emerging. Zixthara felt his blood turn cold. He recognized those signatures. Every spacefaring species that had survived long enough learned to recognize them. Zilthok, he whispered. The Zilthok were the nightmare that haunted every species in the galaxy. They were not a civilization. They were a force of nature. A harvest that swept through populated space every few centuries. Their ships were not built. They were grown. Massive biological constructs that fed on intelligent life itself. Where the hegemony killed to conquer, the Zilthok consumed to survive. They did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply harvested entire regions of space, feeding on populations until nothing remained but empty worlds. The Zilthok fleet that emerged from dark space was smaller than the assembled hegemony armada. But size meant nothing against them. Their ships looked like massive organisms, all twisted organic shapes and pulsing biological systems. They had no decorations, no intimidation displays, no cultural elements at all. They were pure, predatory efficiency. All ships, defensive formation. Zix Thera commanded, his voice tight with fear that was very real. Prepare to retreat to minimum safe distance. Across the hegemony fleet, panic spread. This was not a species they had come to intimidate. This was the predator that even predators feared. Ships began breaking formation, preparing to flee to the edge of the system where they could safely jump to faster than light speeds. On the human ships, the reaction was entirely different. Captain Park's voice cut through the communication channels with sharp authority. All human vessels, combat formation Delta, weapons to full power. Someone get me tactical data on those ships immediately. Zixthara watched in disbelief as the human fleet, instead of fleeing, tightened their formations and moved forward. The casual, amused attitude that had frustrated him for hours was completely gone. The human ships moved with military precision, taking up positions between the Xilthok and the hegemony fleet. Captain Park, Zixthara transmitted, you do not understand what you face. The Xilthok cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be intimidated. They consume entire civilizations. Your only chance is to flee. Park's face appeared on screen, and Zixthara saw something that chilled him more than the Xilthok arrival. The human was not smiling anymore. His expression was cold, focused, and utterly without fear or amusement. We know what they are, Admiral, Park said quietly. We have encountered their scout ships before, 3 years ago on the edge of our space. They tried to harvest one of our colony worlds. We killed them all. That is impossible, Zixthara said. No species fights the Xilthok successfully. We are not most species, Park replied. All hegemony ships. We are transmitting tactical data now. Their biological hulls are resistant to energy weapons, but vulnerable to kinetic impact. Their regeneration cores are located here, here, and here. Targeting data flooded the hegemony communication networks. If you want to survive this, you follow our lead. The Xilthok fleet began moving forward, their ships pulsing with sickening organic rhythm. They had detected the concentration of intelligent life in the system and were moving to harvest it. To them, it did not matter that some ships were human and some were hegemony. All were food. Admiral, his tactical officer said urgently, the human ships are moving to intercept. They are placing themselves between us and the Xilthok. Zixthara could not process what he was seeing. The prey species, the ones they had come to intimidate into submission, were positioning themselves to protect the hegemony fleet. It violated everything he understood about galactic politics and species interaction. The Xilthok opened fire first. Massive bioplasma weapons that could melt through conventional shielding lanced out toward the human ships. The humans did not even try to dodge. Their shields absorbed the impact, flaring bright, and they returned fire immediately. Human weapons were different from hegemony technology. Where the hegemony used sophisticated energy weapons and exotic matter warheads, human weapons were brutally simple. Mass accelerators that fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missiles with overwhelming kinetic energy. Focused explosives designed to shatter rather than disintegrate. The first Xilthok ship that took a direct hit from a human mass accelerator did not explode or disintegrate. It cracked. The biological hull, designed to regenerate from energy damage, could not heal from the massive physical trauma of having a projectile tear through its entire structure. They know how to fight them, Zixthara's tactical officer said with wonder. The humans actually know how to kill Xilthok. Park's voice came through on an open channel, broadcasting to all ships in both fleets. His tone was clipped and professional. The voice of someone who had done this before. Human fleet, pattern gamma. Hegemony ships. If you are going to fight, focus your fire on targets we have already damaged. Do not waste energy trying to punch through fresh hulls. Aim for the organic seams we are opening. One of Zixthara's junior officers looked at him with desperate hope. Admiral? Orders? Zixthara made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. All ships, follow human tactical commands. Focus fire as they direct. We fight together, or we die together. The hegemony fleet moved into formation alongside the human ships. It was awkward and improvised. Two military forces that had never worked together, trying to coordinate in the middle of a battle. But the humans adapted quickly, adjusting their tactics to account for hegemony capabilities. A Zilthok harvester ship moved toward one of the hegemony dreadnoughts, its biological tendrils extending to begin the consumption process. Before it could make contact, 3 human ships intercepted it, their weapons tearing into the organic hull with calculated brutality. Hegemony Dreadnought Valor's call, "Pull back and recharge your shields," Park transmitted. "We have got this one." Zixthara watched as the humans fought with a style he had never seen before. They were not trying to win elegantly or efficiently. They were trying to kill, pure and simple. Their ships took damage that would make other species retreat, but they kept fighting. When shields failed, they kept firing. When hulls were breached, they rerouted power and continued the attack. One human ship, its entire port side torn open by bioplasma fire, deliberately rammed a Zilthok harvester. The collision destroyed both ships, but it also disrupted the Zilthok formation long enough for other human vessels to exploit the opening. "Captain Park's ship is taking heavy damage," a hegemony officer reported. "Their shields are down to 15%. Zixthara looked at the tactical display. Park's vessel, the diplomatic ship that had started this entire encounter, was positioned at the most dangerous point in the battle. It was drawing fire from multiple Zilthok ships to protect a damaged hegemony cruiser that was trying to retreat. "All ships in range," Zixthara commanded. "Focus fire on the Zilthok, targeting Captain Park." Now, the hegemony fleet responded immediately. Dozens of ships turned their weapons on the Zilthok vessels threatening the human captain. Energy beams and matter torpedoes hammered into targets that human kinetic weapons had already wounded. The combined fire was devastating. The Zilthok, facing unexpected resistance and losing ships faster than they could harvest new resources, began to retreat. Their biological vessels pulled back toward the dark space ruptures they had emerged from, withdrawing to find easier prey elsewhere. As the last Zilthok ship disappeared into dark space, an exhausted silence fell over both fleets. Human ships were heavily damaged. Several, completely destroyed. But they had held the line, and more importantly, they had protected the hegemony fleet that had come to intimidate them. Zixthara opened a channel to Captain Park. The human appeared on screen, his uniform torn, and his face covered in soot from internal fires. His ship's bridge was a disaster, with exposed wiring and damaged consoles visible behind him. "Captain Park," Zixthara said slowly, "you positioned your ships to protect us. Why?" Park looked tired, but his eyes were steady. "Because the Zilthok were the real threat, Admiral. You are just trying to expand your territory and maintain control. That is politics. The Zilthok consume entire civilizations. That is genocide. We know the difference. Your species fights very differently than we expected," Zixthara admitted. "You saw us laugh at your intimidation and thought we could not be dangerous," Park said. "But humans learned a long time ago that the things trying to look scary, usually, are not the real threat. The Zilthok do not bother with displays, or warnings, or psychological warfare. They just attack. That is what real danger looks like. That is when we stop laughing." Human ships were conducting repairs while hegemony vessels stood by, uncertain of what would happen next. The intimidation protocol had failed completely, but something far more significant had replaced it. Respect earned through shared combat. Grand Admiral Zixthara sat in his command chair. reviewing the battle recordings for the third time. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare and human nature. The humans had not just fought effectively. They had fought with a brutality and determination that went beyond military necessity. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their ships were damaged, they used those damaged ships as weapons. When faced with impossible odds, they adapted and pushed forward. But it was not mindless aggression. Every move had been calculated. Every sacrifice had served a purpose. The humans fought like they had done this before, many times, against enemies far worse than a hegemony intimidation fleet. "Admiral," his xenocultural advisor said quietly, "I have completed a deeper analysis of human military history. I think you should see this." I. The Peltharian scholar displayed data that painted a disturbing picture of humanity. Their entire evolutionary history was warfare. Not just species against species, but humans against their own planet, against each other, against every obstacle they encountered. Humans have been at war for their entire recorded history, the advisor explained. Not occasional wars like most species, but constant, continuous conflict. They have fought each other, their environment, diseases, predators, and now other species. War is not an aberration for them. It is their natural state. Zixthara watched recordings of human history. Empires rising and falling. Technologies developed specifically to kill more efficiently. Entire philosophies built around the concept of organized violence. Even their entertainment and art were filled with conflict and combat. But they also cooperate, the advisor continued. That is the truly dangerous part. Humans are simultaneously highly competitive and highly cooperative. They can fight each other viciously and then unite instantly against an external threat. They have what they call armies, massive organizations built entirely around the concept of coordinated violence. Most species that reach space travel have moved beyond such things, Zixthara said. Exactly. Most species develop cooperation first, then technology. Humans develop technology to make their warfare more effective, and then use that warfare capability to reach space. They are an apex predator species that never stopped being predators even as they gained intelligence. Captain Park's face appeared on the communication screen, interrupting the analysis. He looked slightly better than before. His uniform changed, and the soot washed from his face. But his expression remained serious. "Grand Admiral, we need to talk about what happens next." Zixthara straightened in his chair. "I agree. The original purpose of my visit here has become complicated." "That is one way to put it," Park said with a slight smile that did not reach his eyes. "You came to intimidate us into submission. We laughed at you. Then, we fought beside you. I suspect this is not how these situations usually proceed." "It is not," Zixthara admitted. "I will be honest with you, Captain Park. I do not know what to do now. My protocol has failed, but I cannot simply leave. The Hegemony Council will expect results." Park nodded. "Then let me help you understand something about humans that your protocol did not account for. We laughed at your intimidation display.